When I was a kid, I used to talk real big shit about how I played every single Star Wars game ever made. I'd spend every moment on the playground regaling anyone who would listen with misremembered plot points and frustratingly long descriptions of cutscenes while I wiped the bogies from my nose with the sleeve of my Thomas the Tank Engine jumper. Picking up in the year 1983, we continue this quest together to achieve the status of playing every single officially licensed Star Wars game released. In the last episode, we dove into the Atari Arcade game Star Wars, released in May. Later that year in October, Parker Brothers, not yet realising they could make a bantha ton of quick cash by reskinning Monopoly sets fast in the Trandoshan bounty hunter on Kashyyyk, released the fourth officially licensed Star Wars video game. Star Wars: Return of the Jedi Death Star Battle for the Atari 2600 and 5200. Now, the Atari 2600 was no longer in its infancy. Originally released in 1977, this home console had already paved the way for later consoles, as well as created a proverbial hyperlane for game developers to step into this growing market, which was going to crash in 1983, though that's a story best told by the experts, not this moron. As I delved into this mission, it became clear to me that the Atari 2600 is very crucial to the early wave of Star Wars games, though let's leave that idea on the workbench for now and come back to it when we retrospect on the decade. So, Return of the Jedi Death Star Battle, released in 1983. A shoot-'em-up that depicts the space battle of Endor, the player assumes the role of Gold Leader and engages in dogfights with the Empire. The aim is reasonably straightforward: destroy the second Death Star. Similarly to the Atari Arcade game Star Wars, released earlier in the same year, the game is broken down into phases. Phase 1. Behind the controls of the Millennium Falcon, you work to shoot down enemy TIE interceptors, hoping to buy time for your allies on the ground to open up holes in the energy shield, which, if you're fast enough, you can slip through. Phase 2. You're engaging in combat with the second Death Star itself. Shooting at the battle station, your task is to knock away chunks of it in order to expose the reactor core, and then score a direct hit. Once the Death Star is defeated, you'll need to dodge for as long as you can as burning wreckage is launched into space. When you lose a life during the flaming wreckage exploding segment, you are sent back to the start again. The game will continue until you have no lives remaining. As per usual, RetroGames.cz are here to help by providing an accessible port, so let's check it out. Holy f***, are my ears assaulted by an absolute cacophony of audio. When I launched the game for the first time, I was getting secondhand PTSD flashbacks of someone else's time during war. My heart rate spiked and I felt like I was about to hurl chunks out the airlock. I'd love to have been a fly on the wall for that design meeting at Parker Brothers. I digress. Across the screen, TIE interceptors and various other enemies fly and occasionally fire in your general direction. In the background, you can see the second Death Star, which... wait a minute. It's being built! Okay game, that's pretty cool. Alright, so between me and the Death Star is a grid that looks like something you'd find in a physics textbook. I'm assuming this is the shield. Without knowing what my ground team is up to, I'm just going to have to rely on my own fancy flying. I seized an opportunity to fly into the hole, and it moved me to the second Death Star. After flying around shooting at the second Death Star, I realised something felt wrong. I didn't lose, I actually defeated it, and then it started back from the beginning and started the loop again, but this actually felt quite inauthentic. So, what is the threshold for me to confidently claim that I've indeed played this title? I was actually inspired by my first and third video in this series. Definitely not the second one, because there was no way in hell I could do anything canonical there. So, anyway, like I said, I was actually inspired by my first and third video in the series, where I attempted some sort of canonical recreation. Defeat the 12 Blizzard Force Imperial Walkers, and nail the Death Star thermal exhaust port with a single shot. I guess I could consider time, so how long was the space battle over Endor? An hour! Unfortunately for me, I have the attention span of a twitchy Rhodian, so that was going to be a challenge. Though, I decided to rewatch Return of the Jedi and realise that I could effectively follow along with the film. The Rebel fleet arrives in the Endor system at about an hour and 33 minutes into the film. It's then approximately 21 minutes later in the film where the shield generator is destroyed. After that, Gold Leader and Red Leader score a direct hit on the second Death Star 7 minutes and 42 seconds later. And finally, the Falcon clears the exploding wreckage of the second Death Star 36 seconds later. I can work with that. So, here's the plan. In one playthrough, I need to do the following. Spend 21 minutes defeating enemies before entering the shield. spend 7 minutes and 42 seconds attacking a Death Star and scoring the final shot somewhere after the 7-minute 42 mark. And then spend 36 seconds dodging debris. Locking in a whole lot of practice on step 3, I prepped until it was time to bring the Empire to its knees. I ain't no mathematician, but boy do I suck at math. I practiced the last phase of the game knowing it was going to be the toughest and realised my math was really bad. Well, not bad, just wrong, which I guess is the definition of bad.
So what I told you was true, from a certain point of view.
After approximately 9 seconds dodging debris, you start again. Also, if I spent 21 minutes in phase 1, I would have simply lost the game due to the second Death Star being reassembled. I didn't know what to do, and in fact was about to scrap the plan altogether and just show general gameplay. Then, I happened to see the miniature Millennium Falcon on my desk. Eureka! Scale. The game is a scaled down version of the film. So let's crunch some numbers. Our reference point of this scale is the debris phase at a time of 9 seconds. 36 divided by 9 equals 4, which identifies the scale at 1 to 4, or a quarter of the length. Running the numbers, we have a new goal. I must remain in phase 1 for 5 minutes and 25 seconds, though I can begin the transition prior to this time if and only if I will end up in phase 2 after 5 minutes and 25 seconds. I must remain in phase 2 for approximately 1 minute and 56 seconds, or until the timer reaches a total of 7 minutes and 21 seconds. From there, I can land the final hit and must survive the entirety of the second Death Star's debris. I was actually reasonably smug about this new goal, and in my head I was thinking this is pretty realistic, but I actually couldn't have been more wrong. The standard I'd set myself was punishing. I was met by failure repeatedly. Sometimes I was on the cusp of success only for it to be snatched away. Though it was after a fair few hours of playing, and a good night's rest, that I realised something was up. Now this is going to sound really silly, but as I play and my score goes up, the game actually gets harder because the Death Star rebuilds faster. Now because I had assumed that it was strictly based on length of play and not my score, I didn't realise that a few of the runs where I was very close to beating the game, I was actually, score-wise, doing worse. Just like a dodgy game of Sabacc, the deck was rigged. I was approaching this wrong. I'm not needing to win the highest score by working hard. I've established the win condition. I just need one good shot on the second Death Star. Hell, that's what the rest of the fighter squadrons are for. Gold Leader has one job, and that's to win. The plan is simple, and will inspire the most boring gameplay you have likely ever witnessed. In order to reach that 5 minute and 25 second mark, I was going to need to dodge, duck, dip, dive, and dodge.
I don't like it. I don't agree with it. But I accept it.
Let's get cracking.
Admiral, we're in position. All fighters accounted for.
Red group, gold group, all fighters follow me.
A fast-paced shoot-'em-up, Death Star Battle does a good enough job transferring the high-stakes space battle from Return of the Jedi onto the home console. However, either intentional or not, the hefty weight of the Millennium Falcon can definitely be felt in the controls, as it has a tendency to drift a little further than the controls direct it to. This game has an appropriate challenge to it, as the difficulty increases as your score does, which allows sufficient room for developing a good mastery yet also providing a continuous challenge. Other titles from this generation don't seem to bombard the player with overwhelming audio, so I can't forgive this game for its poor choice of sounds. Overall though, a fun game that's worth a look. Again, thank you to RetroGames.cz for actually having an available port for this game. If I didn't have access to this website, then I'd be stuffed. I think that'll do for now. Ka kite.